What's going on?
We'll call the meeting to order. Welcome to the regular board meeting of the Nevada Irrigation District Board of Directors, December 8th, 2021. If you will join me to the salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, Madam Secretary, will you call the roll, please?
Yes, Division 1. Here. Division 2.
Here.
Division 3. Here. Division 4.
Here.
Division 5.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. And at this time, I'd like to welcome Mr. Steve Prosser to the first board meeting as a new maintenance manager. Thank you for being here this morning.
Thank you.
Also at this time, I'd like to recognize longtime district employee Les Nicholson, who passed away a couple of weeks ago. He and his dad both served at NID, and he served at some point of that time as hydro manager. So if we'll just take a moment of silence to remember Les and his contribution to NID. Great, thank you. At this time, we'll take public comment on any items not on the agenda. If you'd like to comment this morning, star 9 on your phone. For items not on the agenda that are pertinent to NID. This is the right one. Okay. All right. I don't see any. All right. Move on to the consent agenda. Anybody like to remove?
I want to request that, the topic on, temporary service location.
Okay.
And I'm going to request that item 6 be pulled,
Item 6.
the policy updates.
Anybody else? We have a motion to approve the other items.
I'll make a motion to approve consent items number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, and 10.
I'll second.
Any public comment on consent agenda items to be approved? Star 9 on your phone. All right. Madam Secretary, will you call the roll, please?
Yes, Division 5.
Yes.
Division 1.
Yes.
Division 3.
Aye.
Division 4.
Aye.
Division 2.
Aye. Okay, number 6 was Laura.
Okay, number 6. Yeah, I'm fine with policies, the district policy 2030 for holidays and 2025 for vacation, but I have some concerns about 2090, Errol.
Can I interject on your
Sure.
questioning? I think one of the things that staff went over recently as well is we were thinking of pulling this item and bringing this policy back to the board at a future date and revise. But if I'm in full concurrence with removing it from the resolution and the packet today, and we'll bring it back for some revisions, because I do recognize that there are some errors and clerical errors and some other just functional errors within it, and so staff recommends pulling it and bringing it back at a future date as well. If you want to.
Can I make some suggestions as to what to consider
Sure.
before you bring it back?
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
So,
Maybe it concurs with mine.
yeah. Oh, yes, I'm sorry, here we go. Thank you. Yeah, so my main concerns with it is that right now, the memorandum of understanding for the labor negotiations, it notes that for work apparel, only boots, it specifies I could only find boots. I couldn't find anything about work apparel or hydro fire resistant clothing or anything like that. And it says refer to policy 2090 for boot requirements. And so I'm really not in favor of just moving the classifications to the other. I want to look at the entire policy. I think the policy is a good policy. I think we need to update it. I think we need to add the fire protection. I think we need to work with, staff needs to work with the safety staff to figure out maybe there's other work apparel it seems to me this policy hasn't been updated for a long time, and I'd like to look at it comprehensively for all the work apparel that's required. and to revisit all of the classifications that need it, and just clean it up and keep it a policy. That's my preference. But I'm happy to,
Yeah.
discuss it.
Appreciate that. Director, we will definitely bring this back and take a look at all of those different apparel applications and work apparel requirements that we need, from OSHA to fire safety to everything else, and see if we can incorporate some of those. And there is sort of that disconnect between the current MOU with this apparel policy. So,
Yeah.
you know, this was an attempt to bring it a little more up to date with the MOU, because that was adjusted a little bit, and pulling some of the classifications itself out of a policy, bringing those back over to an MOU. Classifications and job titles aren't necessarily recommended to be in district policy. So that was the original thought process, but I think bringing it back with a more comprehensive look at safety equipment and apparel is appropriate, and I totally concur that we're gonna pull this as well.
Yeah.
And bring it back.
Because then maybe this change, the board is well, I guess the board approved the MOU, so can you it says that you could make changes to position duties and classifications, or changes to the MOU without the board involvement at all?
No, changes to the MOU would have to be completed through a side letter agreement that is approved by the union as well as the board.
Yeah.
One of the challenges that comes up with every agency, including NID, we run across it all the time, is when you have duplicative requirements and policy and in an MOU, which is actually a contract that the district has with its employees, there becomes, over time, it gets a little challenging from an implementation perspective, because it's not always consistent with the policies being updated and consistent with the MOU, so you end up in contradiction. So it is good practice to only have those things in one location, whether the MOU references the policy or the information's housed in the MOU. Now, from a day-to-day perspective, we do manage the staff, I believe, with the hierarchy of documents, and Dustin, correct me if I'm wrong, but the MOU overrides board policy, but we just like to get it all cleaned up. So we had a conversation with Director Peters, and she did bring up there are inconsistencies still with the proposed work apparel policy and the MOU, so we are going to clean all of that up.
Because the MOU does say for boot policy, go to 2090 policy, the MOU, so we could keep it all in the policy, because the hats and shirts and all of that is not in the MOU, only the boots are in the MOU.
And one of the challenges with work apparel, it really does fall under kind of that operations umbrella. So there could be a situation in which myself or management staff has made a determination that it is necessary for somebody to wear specific safety gear or be identified in some manner. And from an operational perspective, safety is going to, so what happens if it's not listed in the policy, I'm still going to ensure we're compliant with OSHA and doing all the things we should be doing. So some of that, I think, some of our board policies get a little too nuanced in operations from the perspective that there's no practical application of it. So we just need to go through and sort
But there's a
it out.
fiscal implication.
There is a higher
Apparel,
fiscal
the
implication.
work apparel is a fiscal implication,
Yeah.
which is of the board's interest, I think.
I think that there's also a higher fiscal implication for safety issues, and a long-term workers' comp issue.
Liability.
And that's why we need to clean up the policy.
Yeah.
That's why we need to clean it up.
So I think that we've committed to bringing it back, so it's.
Great, I'm very happy with that. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Number 7, Director Hall. Number 9, I mean.
I think that we should, President Bierwagen, I would recommend
Take
that
a
we take
motion.
a motion on item 6 first.
To table?
I make a motion to table item 6.
Pull the whole item. So she now needs to
Oh,
vote on number 6 with that out of it. They need to modify the
As
resolution to
amended.
apply.
okay.
2090.
I make a motion,
Tabling 2090.
2090.
29.
So essentially, my recommended modification to the resolution would be to adopt resolution 2021 with the following change, updating district policy 2030 holidays, district policy 2025 vacation.
Chris, did you write that all down?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, good. Then she doesn't have to say it again.
Yes, I'll second that.
Can the general manager make
She
motion?
can't make a motion.
But she said it so perfectly.
All right, I'll take a stab at it. I move
You're
to.
gonna take a stab at it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I move to, approve Resolution 2021-42, excluding work apparel policy number 2090,
Okay,
with 2090 to be brought back to the board at a future date.
Okay,
there we go.
absolutely.
Okay, is there any public comment on this, item number 6, the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none, Madam Secretary, will you call the roll, please?
Division 5,
Yes.
Division 1,
Yes.
Division 3,
Aye.
Division 4,
Aye.
Division 2.
Aye. Okay.
Okay, so I have some questions about kind of the process. So one question is, how do we know we're gonna build a future water line there? I mean, how do you, and then if you were not to build a future water line in one of these, what do you do with the money?
So, the first part is about our orderly development of our system, right? So we look at, obviously, the main roads that continue on, those roads are kind of a no-brainer in terms of those that have pipelines along them. What we look at on these side roads are roads that dead end, how many parcels can be served within that? Right? What's best for our customer would be to have a main line to be able to serve 8 to 10 parcels. If it's 4 parcels that are only gonna be served off of this private road, then they're probably just all variance parcels because we're not gonna extend a main line to serve 3 or 4 parcels, right? So we just kind of look at each one as they come in, we take a look to see if, yes, we would expect that a water line could go up this road to be able to serve this area within the community. So we just do that on a case-by-case basis.
Is it within some like planning horizon, or, you know, in other words, do you say, okay, this parcel, we can anticipate that within the next 5 years, given orderly development, that we would, or?
No,
Okay.
we don't. But it's just whether we would envision a water line as our system expands to serve this area, would we expect a water line to be in front of this parcel or not?
At some point in
At
time?
some point in the future.
Okay.
Not specifically that within the next 5 or 10 years.
Okay, and so given that we don't know the time horizon for that expansion, how do we estimate cost based on some future,
So we have a formula in there based on parcel size, and then we have a cost that we utilize in there to come up with that number, and that gets adjusted based on,
Wait a minute, that's,
Is the calculation in the rules and regulations, the formula?
yes, it is.
is it in the, does the contract reflect that?
I don't think the contract reflects that, it's in the rules and regs with how we develop the cost.
I guess my
It's not in-
point is
it's not in
that
the contract.
if we don't have a planning horizon for when the line would be extended, then we don't really know, I mean, it could be 20 years from now, we don't have any idea what the cost would be then.
Correct.
But this family has put down money now in anticipation of that future line.
Correct.
So how, I mean, I didn't read it in the contract, but maybe it's here, that this initial investment of 13,000 could be upped to reflect the actual cost.
No, that is not in there.
but is it true? I mean, my understanding is they pay the 13,000 and they're good forever. I mean, whether it costs 50,000 or,
That's correct. There's several problematic things with this current policy. The temporary service line, the district-funded water lines, and the standby charges need to come back for,
definitely.
That's what I'm doing. In the contract in number 4, the last sentence, most
Yeah.
of the contribution will be required
Yeah.
unless it's subdivided. So if the property were to subdivide,
Yeah.
then that 13,000 can get assigned to one parcel, but not to the other. Otherwise, this is a one-time.
So, does the customer, so let's say the future water line is put in, do they pay another connection fee at that time?
They pay a connection fee in terms of the meter reinstallation.
Yeah.
And they pay that upfront, so they've already paid for that. And so when that happens, we will relocate the meter to the front of the property along the main line, and it'll be their responsibility to then tie into that new location of the meter.
But we fund the transfer of the meter from the one
They pay
existing.
for it, so they pay for the two connection fees.
Okay.
But they've already paid it. They're paid both of them at today's rate, rather than the second meter should be paid when it's installed, because likely charges are gonna go up.
Right, from my perspective, I think one of the larger issues is that we're collecting fees for a line that may or may not be
Right.
constructed
Yeah,
into the
right.
future. I do think this needs to be looked at. One of the challenges with these, so I believe in the past 6 months, we've brought forward maybe 3 or 4 of these items. One of the challenges we're having at the staff level is that the private property owner, when they originally approached the district to have this temporary connection at the main line point, they're responsible for going through and securing the easements from their neighbor
Right.
properties.
My question.
And so what has happened is that that is a fairly long process for
Sure.
them. And
Yeah.
so it doesn't, because of the efforts they've already put in, from securing the easement to having some standard of expectation that they're going to have this connection, I don't feel that it's warranted to not move forward to request approval from the board for the actual agreement. But with all that said, for these particular ones that have been kind of in the works for a while, with all that said, I do feel that the policy is problematic overall.
Well, I have I was not, gonna suggest that we not approve this. I think that you're absolutely right. This family has already invested significant time and effort into the process, so that's not my point. My point is that, I wanted to understand more about what the process is, and, I would like to have brought back to the board a list of all pending, transactions that you feel are in the pipeline to the point where we can't pull them out. And I would also like to request that no further, requests be processed until we have a chance to approve it, to review and look at the policies relative to those 3, district water line those 3 policies.
So this is actually a good time for that. This is the last already approved TSL. And when they get a TSL that's approved, they have 2 years in which to move forward with it. This is the last one that has been approved that's currently in the works. So anything else now would be new coming in as of today. So if the board's direction to freeze those as we bring this forward to have the discussion on it, we can do that.
That's what I would request.
I would recommend that as well. And I would recommend also to change whatever the regulation or policy is to say you have to have preliminary easement understandings to where you can complete this project with, you can complete it within, it was 1 year for something and 2 years for something else. I can't remember the exact regulation language. But they have to have talked to their neighbors first to make sure that this is even a feasible thing. Because for us to keep extending them when their neighbors are never gonna give them until, they get a new neighbor and then 10 years later, it's problematic.
Could we approach it, though, by just putting a hiatus on this policy and the other 2, and then address all of the issues and have management's recommendation on what approach we would take?
Yeah, I think that's warranted. I'm happy with receiving informal direction regarding that. As, Mr. Roderick just mentioned, we don't have any other ones
Yeah.
in the pipeline, so I think we're in a good spot to kind of take a pause on it.
Right.
Good.
I have another question about this, and this is really for Dustin. I note, and there is no requirement in here for the customer to provide insurance. And I'm wondering, is that something that should be considered to be in this agreement?
I don't know why we would. We don't typically require that for any customer.
Okay,
Once we set the meter, remember, everything
Right.
on their side of the meter is their responsibility.
right.
Homeowner's insurance may or may not cover damages or any liability event from their side of the line, so to speak. Presumably, there's easement or some kind of an agreement between the neighbors as to the private line traversing a neighbor's property to get to the place of use. They may, that's a private arrangement. We do not get into the middle of that. So they may have set up their own terms, insurance, and so on. I don't know. I don't see those documents. But from the district perspective, I don't think we really care.
Just like any other meter connection.
Okay.
If it was right in front of your property, it'd be the same thing. We set our meter, we're responsible for that.
Okay. Thank you. Just curious.
And what if they damage our meter box? If they break, you know,
Oh, it's just like, it would be just like any other process. I mean, we set our meter and then set the valve on the one side, so they just connect to it. I don't believe, Chip, you can tell me if I'm wrong, I don't think we have much trouble with people damaging our stuff just connecting to it.
okay.
Usually they're gonna run over the box or run over the meter later on and different things like that, and that's just part of.
Part of the maintenance.
Not usually the meter that gets damaged, it's the box.
Right.
Right. Okay.
So I would move that we, accept, I don't know, approve consent item number 9, for the temporary service line agreement for water service and contribution to the future treated water main extension with Gretchen Flohr and Walter S. Flohr.
Yeah.
And I second that.
Okay, go ahead. Well, I second it with a caveat that we're giving direction.
Well, do we need a caveat in the motion or not?
Yeah, we
No.
can capture that in a minute.
All right,
Okay.
perfect. That was my own.
So, yeah, I would second Karen's motion.
Any further discussion from the board? Any member of the public like to, public comment on this item? Turn on your phone. Madam Secretary, will you call the roll, please?
Division 5,
Yes.
Division 1,
Yes.
Division 3,
Aye.
Division 4,
Aye.
Division 2.
Aye. Thank you very much. Okay, general order number 11.
Hey, Board, thank you. Greg Jones, Assistant General Manager. Start us in on the conversation with the surplus property review today. Item number 11. Today, we're here to deliberate and provide direction from the Board on potentially initiating a process to declare certain real property that the district owns as unnecessary and surplus. Kind of a background history, since 1921, NID has been involved in acquiring land for its purposes, use, and operations over the years. To date, NID owns approximately 10,923 acres. I know that was a question on the last plan for water meeting, kind of how many acres does NID own? Well, this is the number itself, so that kind of answers that question. All property is a matter of public record, and in general, the district considers its property that it owns to be used and necessary for its purposes, unless otherwise deemed surplus on an annual basis. So the water code of, the state water code allows the district to purchase property and engage in acquisition of property. Section 50569 requires us to bring an inventory of all the lands held back to the board to determine whether or not surplus is an actual need, and so this is what this report is today. Staff has gone through all of the properties that it's owned, that it owns. It owns properties all the way up to, as we saw last night in some of the presentations, up in the highest reaches of the middle fork of the Yuba River. We own areas within the English Meadow area, Jackson Meadows, all the way down to the furthest reaches of our water system down towards the city of Lincoln. Within that, there are other properties that the district owns that are outside of district lands and district boundaries. Most of the properties are owned within the district lands. There's a list that is in the board packet that's broken down. We tried to give you as detailed a review of these properties as we could. There was conversation early on among staff about how we, might best present this to the board. We do have roughly 285,000 acres of district land that is within our district boundaries. Then there's roughly another 70,000 acres that is up in the upper division watershed above Scotts Flat Lake and Rollins, that putting all of that into one easy to look at and dissect map system is extremely difficult, because some of these properties can be very small in size. Clearly, some are larger and broader in scope and scale, but we did hear that there might be some interest if we want. The only maps that we did present today are the maps of the actual properties and sort of a close-up of where they are in relation to the district. We could bring back a much broader map that talks about the specific properties that we've identified as sort of our kind of thought process on this. And they break up into about 4 different district needs that staff had identified. And really that is district operations. So an example of that are water pumps, pump stations, treatment plants, powerhouses, offices, infrastructure, reservoir lands, canal infrastructure. So that was one sort of segmentation of all of these properties that we would look at. Another was the recreation needs. Clearly, there's a recreation component within our systems that we own and operate and manage, and that would be something that the staff would not be recommending. Those would be surplus lands. Another is for watershed protection. NID over the years has purchased various properties within its district boundaries and outside of its district boundaries up into the upper watersheds. And those, throughout the years, have been identified, at least we're identifying them now, as watershed protection lands. We define those as areas that we would not really classify as surplus, as we've seen in the river fire just recently. The district owned 300 watershed acres within that section. Out of 2,600 acres that burned, NID has been really the only entity beyond PG&E and cleaning up the efforts around the Bear River Canal that has really put in any substantial and large-scale cleanup and mitigation efforts. So we think that that's sort of one of those things that if we don't own it, if we can't manage it, then if something happens to it, then we're subject to the aftermath. So we want to take control of that destiny on some of those. So those were a number of parcels. Some of those are much larger in size, 300, 400, 500 acres in size. And the last one was project-specific needs. So whether we own a piece of land for a particular project, we found a couple pieces of land that in this assessment that were purchased from the district or were acquired through another parcel or for a project that we might have done back in the 50s and 60s, and it was a treatment pipe up in Cascade Shores that we've identified here that clearly we're just, there's segments of a road that we really just don't see any need for. So those were the 4 basic premise of how staff went through this process and thought about the conversation about surplus properties. We broke them down as best we could into 5 different segments. So sort of upper division, that's that Nevada, Placer, and Sierra counties above Rollins and above Scotts Flat. Nevada County in district, list of properties there, 143 specific properties totaling 4,654 acres. Nevada and Yuba counties, those would be outside of district boundaries. There's about 7 properties there at about 73 acres. Placer County, in district, 42 properties, APNs. When I say properties, those are just specific APNs, 868 acres. And then Placer County district, out of district lands, 22 properties there. We did specifically pull out the Centennial projects as their own sort of highlight for the board, just to be fully transparent, because they are embedded in that 10,922 acres, or 923 acres in total. But just to be perfectly transparent and open, we've pulled those out and called them out. They are roughly 48 particular parcels. They're labeled within our GIS program as kind of centennial project related, only because there's a portion or a segment of a particular parcel that is within that property, APN, that would be within that centennial annexation zone should that project move forward. So that is why. Some of these parcels we've owned since 1926 and 25, right? But for full transparency and for the board to see, we definitely wanted to pull that out and just say that those are part of it. As a caveat to that, the staff, because that project is budgeted, it is within the board's prerogative, and there has been no further direction on that project. We have determined as staff that at this point would not be included in today's discussion within the surplus lands, but of course, that's up to the discussion here within today. You can see there's a little matrix starting on page 3 of the staff report that tells you the exact location, APN, the number of acres, and we did some high-level research, thanks to Doug's team and the engineering, that we did some high-level research on what was the original purpose of some of these lands. Some of them, as you can see, they date back into the 60s. Some of them, they are as recent as a 1999 tax default acquisition from the district. There's really one property that is of any magnitude of size for 4.3 acres. And there's a little description there. I don't think I need to go into the specific description of what these are, but in total, staff identified roughly a little over 6.4 acres, 9 individual parcels. All of those contained within Nevada County, within the district. There are specific maps of where those are, and you can kind of make that out, try to be as specific as you can to those and the location. So there's 2 maps representing all of those 9 parcels. So what are we asking for today? The board, there's really two things. Direct staff to conduct further research into the use and purpose of these parcels, so that in order for us to prepare further resolution declaration that these properties may or may not be surplus. So like I said earlier, these were really high-level kind of overview. We didn't go into, some of these might have particular deeds or easement characteristics to them that we have to abide by, and so we just haven't gotten into the details of the specific parcels themselves, just some high-level activity. Or do not accept these as real properties and provide staff with direction. So those are kind of the two. If there's a third alternative that I missed, please let me know. But that sort of opens it up, and I'll just see if there's any questions.
Director Heck?
Thanks for this presentation. I've got several questions here. First, I note that in the staff report, it says, that the government code section requires an annual inventory.
That's my question.
And this is the first time I've been on this board now since my 4th year. I have not ever seen an annual inventory. And, we don't need to revisit history, other than I'm curious, do you know why this has never been brought to the board prior to now?
Or when was it last?
Or when was it last?
Yeah, I don't know exactly when. I know that there was movement prior to me being here, that there was some movement to get to this place, and it just never sort of materialized. Dustin, I don't know, in terms of
So there's not a requirement, in my opinion, to bring it to the board. There's a requirement to maintain an inventory, which the district does in its records. So we can, as a matter of practice, if that's what the board wants, have a kind of an annual item revisiting the district's real property ownership. It's not required.
so
But it,
I thought.
it is, it says we need to determine if there's overuse.
I still have.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Thank
Can you
you.
speak into your mic more?
Oh, yeah,
You need to
sorry.
do that. Thank you.
see. That's a little better.
Perfect, thank you.
Thanks. I do think that it is useful to have an annual, analysis of the district-owned properties, because as time moves forward, some will become surplus or not. And I do, it's funny that you would interpret it that, because what this says is the government code requires an annual inventory. I see that you're interpreting that as just to have the inventory and not notify the board, but I kind of disagree. I think the intent is that your elected officials need to know what properties are owned and what are surplus, if any, and so on. So I did kind of want to put that out there. And then I wanted to also ask, you know, in my time on the board and before, the inventory of properties owned has always been one of those behind the curtain kind of things, right? You know, it's like, I won't go into the full story, but I can recall, because I'm a real estate person, wanting to know, well, what does the district own? And I spent hours looking up and, you know, going into title company records and so on, and it's very difficult as a layperson to figure it out. And historically, it's not been information that has been easily obtainable for members of the public. There's nobody here to blame for any of this, by the way, but I'm just sort of stating what I have experienced. So I'm thinking that now that we're bringing this into the light, that's wonderful. And it would be helpful, I know, to me and to others. I'm wondering if we could get maps, and if you divide them up the way you have, upper division, in-district, Nevada, Yuba, out-of-district, and so on, that it would give us, you know, a context for looking at these. And I would really like to see, is that a big job?
No, absolutely, we can definitely do that. It'll just take, you know, it's just a matter of creating those maps and bringing them forth that are in a, you know, in a usable fashion. Sometimes it's gonna be 6 or 7 different maps for,
Right, but that's okay, but.
you know, Nevada County or
Yeah,
something.
the scale of it,
Scale.
there may be a lot of maps just because of the
Right.
scale, to be able to see some of the.
But, you know, dividing them in these categories that you have is one place to start.
Yeah, and we even thought, yeah, that, or just by the specific need, but I think that we can definitely come back with those maps specifically so that we can see where these APNs are in the
Right.
overall,
Right, in relationship to each other, in
yeah,
relationship
the
to.
overall region of how we operate, where we operate.
Right,
Can I make
And
a
then-
quick addition?
oh, sure, okay,
Insertion there?
because I do have a couple other things.
Yeah, I'm only gonna, could we add to this analysis, you have the uses, district operations, rec, watershed protection, project-specific needs. Can each parcel be, as you look at the map, each parcel is affiliated with an A, B, C, or D?
Identify it that way?
Yes, so that we not only see where
Sure.
they're
That's
located,
a
but
good
we
idea, but what's
see.
the purpose,
Yeah,
the purpose?
exactly.
what is the purpose, the district's purpose for that?
Yeah.
That's a good, that's okay.
I think we could do that.
Discussion. Let's see, but now I lost my thought. Go. It's okay. So map of the district. Oh, I know. So is there somewhere, these are all assets, and for some, these are extraordinarily, valuable assets. Is there a list of these, are these listed in our, balance sheet as assets to the district? And if so, are they listed as the values that they were back then, or current values? Do you guys know?
It wouldn't be current.
Go ahead, Debbie.
Well, I was gonna say, yeah. It depends.
And maybe identify yourself for.
Hi, I'm Debbie Martin, I'm the controller here at the district. So I would say, as a matter of accounting, any time that we made a purchase of real property, we would record that at the time of the purchase. So anything in the balance sheet right now would be at historical cost.
Okay,
So your assets that you see in there, would be, if we bought it in the 60s, if it was conveyed to us, it would be recorded. So we would be relying on our predecessors to make sure all of that was recorded. We have, you know, this current listing here that we can make sure that there weren't any gaps, something, but, we do as a matter of course, every time we, sell property, anytime we buy property,
right.
we record that. And as well as, you know, Greg's information with working with the insurance to make sure that that's proper and that's right in it. And we went through a pretty extensive listing with the current insurance carrier too, to update that. So it's always a process to do that cleanup.
So they're historical values, basically. And is there any need within the GAAP accounting to bring those values to current market or something within?
Never,
There isn't, okay.
never.
You can't do it.
That would be
I just
something
wondered.
you might do if you were gonna borrow some money, and that's a special purpose balance sheet or set of financial
Right.
statements you would do to put some kind of current.
If you wanted to
value.
borrow against them.
Yeah, but
And
that's just.
And I presume all these properties are quote unquote free and clear, we have no debt on any of these properties?
I don't believe so, no. The only time an asset would have, include additional value is if there was a capital improvement made to it that was.
Understood,
Right.
right.
So, Mike, if I can jump in on that very
Yes,
quickly.
yes.
Follow up. So it doesn't, we're not adjusting the balance sheet like I would do in my financial statement for my personal, on my personal property. I adjust that when the market went down, I had to adjust it. Came back up, I had to adjust it again.
Right, that's
So
kind of.
public agencies are not doing that by statute or by requirement, or they don't do that. So our balance sheet doesn't reflect the
Current value.
the current value of the property. Okay,
No,
Not
that's
reasonable, yeah.
the moving target.
right?
Well,
You're not
it is, and like I
revaluing.
said, I adjust it every time, right?
Yeah, no, you
So-
don't revalue it. And as I said, if you're gonna go through some kind of major financing for that, the bank may ask that you provide that information, but that's a separate document from your financials and a separate process, and it would be only on an as-needed basis, because accounting generally is based on historical costs.
Okay.
Okay.
And then if I may continue just a few
Yes,
more,
go
I
ahead.
know, what's the fun line of questioning here. So if we were to declare these 9 properties as surplus, then what happens? Is there a statutory obligation to dispose of them, sell them, make them available to other public agencies? What happens?
I can maybe, yeah, so we would come back to you with a resolution.
Uh-huh.
The Irrigation District Act requires you to dispose of unnecessary property by resolution. So we would present that to you. There would probably be some findings in there as to why it's no longer necessary for business purposes. Assuming the board then approved that resolution, there's an additional legal process to make the property available to other public agencies. I've actually never seen any public agency jump on that opportunity, but it's a hoop that you jump through. I think the statutory obligation is intended for an urban area, or an urban setting, where they want to see opportunity for low-income housing development or something.
Sure,
like that.
okay.
So, anyway, but it's still a legal requirement where you offer it up to public agencies that may be interested. And if there's an offer, I'm surprised there's an offer on the property, then there's a process for negotiation, price and terms. As I said, I've never seen it done in California. Have you?
I actually have.
Okay, maybe you can speak to that then.
Is there a requirement when you offer it out to a public agency for the district to put a value on that property? You can just say, hey, here's property, make it an offer, or
Yeah,
whatever.
the statutory process actually contemplates a negotiation between the two public agencies.
Okay,
Yeah, when you're dealing with public agency, you can enter into this negotiation that could take into consideration other factors besides just the market value of the property. If you're gonna sell a piece of property to a private individual, if you do not sell it for what would be referred to as fair market value, then you would have to come up with some overriding consideration that provides a benefit to the ratepayers. Otherwise, you could find yourself in a situation that would get the public funds.
right, right. So I've got just a few more here, sorry, you guys, but heard my thing. My sense is that in looking at these 9 parcels, some of which are just minuscule little fragments of roads and things, that this doesn't really have, there's like a de minimis value to it from a market perspective. And my opinion is that it's not even worth us to put it out for sale, because that process would probably cost more than we would ever see from on the return from the property sale, specific to these 9 properties. The one exception might be that 4 acres on Slate Creek. But now, which brings me to my next question is, on the maps that you gave us, it doesn't show us where the water lines are in relationship to the parcels, where our service area is. And the reason I think that's important is because several of these are said that you know, you anticipated using this for future water line extensions. And if that's true, how do they relate to where the water lines currently are? And we can't really tell from that to make a decision, you know, or maybe I've missed it somehow.
So, yeah, for this particular map, the pipelines are on there.
Right.
But as for an example, when staff looks at this, like those 3 slivers of road that you see there.
Yeah, off of Lava Lane.
Off of Lava Lane and Lava Zone Way. Originally, the thought was to be able to get water, off of Lava Cap Mine Road, a lot of lava's in here, over to Lee Lane. But in, 2012, 13, EPA, as part of that water line extension, ran the water line from Lee Lane across over to Lava Cap Mine Road and then down. So we no longer need another route to go across, because we already have a pipeline across. You're correct, I mean, it may have been helpful to have them in the map so that you can see that.
Yeah, it
Those are
was,
the things that we look at staff-wise to say,
right.
yeah, these 3 don't make sense because we now have a crossing to get from point A to point B, so we're not gonna have another one that's gonna go across there.
See, that actually would have been helpful information, and to see where our water lines are in relationship to these parcels. But I'm still kind of a mind that, this is so small that to deal with it, even just all this discussion costs more than the properties are worth.
Well, I think-
Eventually.
I was just gonna say too that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that these parcels don't cost the district anything. We're not paying property taxes on these parcels.
Right, so it's like, why do anything with them unless we have some liability that we should consider?
You hit the nail on the head. I mean, really,
That's why they're still.
there was
Still there.
there was an idea to bring concept here, because we haven't brought, the
Right.
board has not seen a comprehensive overview such as this. Dustin's absolutely correct. The inventory is here. It's in our systems, and we do review it. But in this aspect, these little parcels are stuff that NID doesn't necessarily maintain, monitor. There's nothing to maintain.
Right.
On some of these road systems over here in Lava Lane, there are easements that NID on top of the lands that we own, but yet our deeds state that we have no maintenance issues at all on these roads. So it is a de minimis conversation in a lot of ways, but it is a conversation that the board has asked to bring forward.
Yes, and by the way, and thank you.
Yeah.
Because this, like I said, this has been behind the curtain for years.
Sure,
From the public perspective.
and honestly, from staff's perspective, going into, that's why this sort of alternatives idea number 1 is, if we have direction to go over and figure out the 0.03 acres off of Red Dawn and how to dispose of that effectively and efficiently and figure all this out, it's more staff time than I think definitely than a parcel's worth when it's sitting in a residential neighborhood, and I'm sure many people just don't even notice that it's an NID property. Doubt we have any signs that say keep off. There's probably no fence there.
Right.
So I think in general, Director Heck, you are correct, except for the fact that 4.3 acres.
Right.
They may have some residual value that is worth at least paying attention and.
Well, so then, turning then to the Slate Creek property, are there any water lines close to this? See, again, they're not on here, so we can't tell. I would have asked that you guys.
But
water lines.
some of these, it doesn't really necessarily matter where a particular water line.
Well, it does if it goes to value of it. If there was a NID service right close by or something, that would have an impact on its market value.
And that's what we would assess if we were asked to go forth and try to determine if it is valuable or what value may attain to it. But, in this respect, as Doug mentioned, right, we do know where the particular water, there's nothing around this particular zone.
There isn't, okay.
No.
There's some raw water in the area,
There's
treated
a
water
creek.
anywhere.
There is raw water that,
Not on the parcel, but in the general area.
in the general area, yeah. Again, I'm guessing with no water, and this is not a great area for wells, this would have a pretty small value too, and probably not worth staff time to do much with it, unless somebody came to us and said, hey, you know, I'd like to buy this parcel, it joins mine, I'd like to have it. We go, okay, cool, let's talk about it.
And occasionally, we do get those phone calls.
Yeah. Okay, well, so I requested a map of the NID parcels. I think that would be helpful for us and the public. And then I've asked my questions here, thank you. And then lastly, I pointed out to Jennifer, you know, we have that one parcel, the ditch tender's house, out there on the shores of Scotts Flat. And, you know, that to me has a very high market value, and I don't know what district's purpose that thing has. If we were to sell it, we would get a premium for that piece of property. We could reserve an easement for NID, for access, for whatever purpose we needed, and I just would kind of like you to take a look at that separately, because I think, as you know, there was a lot of money poured into that thing, and I'm not sure that it serves the ratepayers and the taxpayers any.
Right. My question is it a separate parcel, or is it part of the overall, the land that surrounds the lake?
Well, we could make it a separate.
That's a good question, I don't know. It is the only adjoining parcel to the lake that if it was to be separate, outside of district ownership. The story behind that is that there was money put into that as an opportunity for additional, revenue in certain ways, as event center, wedding site, right? Different opportunities within there. That has kind of been shelved for a minute, but I don't know if the general manager we could look into it and see what the overall consideration of it is, but there are some kind of historical opportunities. We had talked about using it as a education center, a watershed house of some sort.
Yeah, from my understanding, and mind you, it's more based off of folklore.
Folklore, yes,
Yeah,
that's right.
than
Very good.
anything
Good term.
written, is that there's more of a historical value to the district for the property, and that it was intended within the past decade to be used for this kind of educational event center, meeting center type thing. The improvements that were completed to support that type of use were completed right kind of before COVID started, and so nothing has happened. But it's sounding like the board would like to revisit the house in general, which we can. I mean, that is completely fine with staff. We can bring that back as a separate item. And I don't know the parcel, I don't know.
How big of a parcel is it?
I don't know how the parcel lines, I've never looked at a parcel map there.
It would be interesting to look at.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's a small individual parcel, we'd have to double check that, but.
Yeah.
We can take a look at it.
You listed
Because I
in
could
here.
see, you know, granting ourselves an easement for access, so, you know, to take care of our facilities or whatever we need, but you know, that house and I don't have to get into it, but I think that would be worthy to look at, because that has significant value.
You have an estimate of value?
Ricky, the real estate broker, thinks that it's between $750,000 and $1 million as it sits,
Because of the view.
because of the access to the lake.
Well, we can come back with
Yeah.
some,
I mean,
if the
Yeah.
board wants, we can come back with sort of some benefits, what is it for, what are some issues?
What
If
is
we
our
did sell it
plan
to a
to-
private property owner,
Yeah.
you know, we do have some, like I said, if that was the case, that we don't have any private properties that abut the reservoir currently.
So it would be the only
It
framework.
could be the only one
well, wait, don't our campgrounds have that?
that is non-NID owned. NID owns the whole, the surrounding property
Right.
around the lake.
No private property, it goes to the water.
Correct.
Oh, okay.
This one would.
Yeah.
But we can review it, and bring that item.
We can review it,
I think it just has a lot of value and it's worth taking a look at.
Yeah,
It's
it'd be
not top of
interesting.
your list of
Mhm.
things to do, obviously.
So I've heard it,
This conversation.
yeah, so I'm hearing that the board would like to revisit the ditch tender's house. We can look at it, look at the improvements that have been made within the past decade, kind of look at what the old plans were, what the thought process was, and have a
And whether
conversation.
that still holds up,
Mhm.
you know, for the world and where we are today, and what we need it for.
Yeah.
Good point.
And then again, who wants to sit on the side of the lake, listen to dry stack boats go by all day?
This doesn't, because have you ever been there? It's right at the
Flohr back.
entrance where Deer Creek is, so those dry stack boats
Are out there.
wouldn't be there. But anyway, and then lastly, I mentioned this to Jennifer, and I'll be done, thank you, colleagues, that, I really would like to see the Centennial properties, a separate list with a separate, have a board discussion about those separate from this discussion at some point in the future.
Now, it was originally intended, and we can change direction, that the properties would be discussed once the plan for water
Right,
process.
that's right.
Okay,
That's right.
but
I
further
remember
along.
that. Yeah, okay. That's it, I'm done. Thank you, everybody,
To
for
answer my question.
indulging me. Thank you.
Director Peters.
Regarding the ditch tender's house, since we've been on the board, we've spent $400,000 to $500,000 on that property. And so, to switch gears now, I don't know that we would make enough. And
I don't know.
I don't know.
That's-
And I don't know if we want private. I'm personally, it's public lands, we're a public agency and our properties are public, and so I would personally be much more in favor of, utilizing it as a recreational rent, like it was originally planned for. It wasn't really rehabilitated for like weddings and things like that, but,
Right.
but I think that it would be better used, my personal opinion is that we could recoup some of that money just over, I don't know the return on investment on it, but we've got a lot of money
We have
in
a
that
lot of
house
money.
right now, and so to turn around and sell
I
it.
propose we agendize this separately.
Yeah,
Okay,
good idea.
okay. And then regarding this
will,
item, I have some,
Because it's worthy of
Yep.
separate
Bring it back.
discussion.
yeah, okay.
And,
And so this item, the way these lists were put together was really very difficult to follow. And the law says we're supposed to purchase properties for the purposes of the district. You list the purposes, but you didn't attach them to the properties. And so in the spreadsheet, and you didn't even put the properties together